Right now, time to get on the Rude Guest Hotline. Talk to our friend, Mr. Ben Standig from The Athletic. Covers
Benjamin.
the Commanders. Really locks in around draft time. What up, Benny? How you doing?
Fellas, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
For sure, man. I guess we start with this Josh Johnson stuff. They got Mariota back already. Still got Hartman. I feel like it's kind of weird. What do you make of the move to acquire Josh Johnson?
Yeah, I feel like it's a little odd to me in the sense that, I'm looking ahead, right? Mariota re-signed to a 1-year deal, and, he's getting up there a little bit. He can still play, but let's just imagine he's not back next year. Who's the 2026 backup? And it felt like the third string here would be an opportunity to, possibly develop somebody, whether that's Sam Hartman or a younger guy. I mean, Jeff Driscoll is not a kid, but, a little bit younger guy. Josh Johnson turns 39 next month. And he's played on 100 teams, so I don't see him being the answer next year. And you already have a vet in Mariota, so look, he's obviously a guy that's played in this league a lot. Teams trust him if they need.
He's been here
if he goes in.
It's a 1-year deal, right?
Yeah, 1-year deal.
Yeah.
So it just feels a little bit odd, I guess, that you went for a 39-year-old as the third string when you already have Mariota. But again, it's for this year. He's fine option, and we'll see if that plays out that he's the third guy, or unless say Sam Hartman, is able to wow the coaches.
Yeah, because you have Driscoll. We'll see. It's interesting. My most relevant Josh Johnson nugget is that late in whatever year that was, they had Peterson and the 100 quarterbacks got hurt. 18, yeah, and Josh Johnson was the quarterback. They beat Jacksonville in Jacksonville.
Yep.
I watched him warm up in pregame warm-ups down on the field. Josh Johnson has an absolute rocket.
Mm-hmm.
Not the most accurate arm, but it's strong. And I saw him. He was warming up. But these quarterbacks don't really test it that much. And he threw a ball so hard that the dude missed catching it, and it went all the way down the tunnel. Like they just happened to be standing next to where he went. The ball went all the way down the tunnel. I was like, okay.
You got a cannon.
Yeah, dude.
I don't know where it's going, but he got a cannon.
And then the next week they were in Tennessee, and Adrian Peterson almost willed them to a victory on his own. And then Johnson threw a back-breaking pick late in that game. That's when Swearinger went nuts afterwards, if anybody remembers that.
Mm-hmm.
Those were interesting times, man.
It's been some interesting times.
All right, Benny, but specifically I wanted to have you today to talk draft. So Josh Johnson's in town. Maybe we do a Josh Johnson segment a little later, B. But I want to lean into the draft with Ben because I know how much work he puts into it. They pick 29th. Let's start here. Do you think they pick 29th?
I mean, I think ideally they would love to trade out. And I mean, Adam Peters said as much when we spoke to him down at the owners meeting. They only have the 5 picks. The thing about this draft is, from I don't even know, say 15 to in the 40s, the opinions are going to vary dramatically in terms of how players are ranked because there's not viewed as much variance between them. So trading down a few spots would not only get them an extra pick or two, but also, they're probably not going to miss out on a talent tier for the most part. So that's what they would like to do. Obviously, it takes 2 to tango. Their best bet, I would think, is that the quarterback slide. Shadur Sanders, not just gets past 2 and 3, he goes into the 20s, and not that necessarily a team would trade up he would be there at 29, but now maybe Jackson Dart is still on the board and the team wants to trade up, or Jalen Milroe, if this, recent buzz about him possibly being in the first round is real. I think that's probably your best hope in terms of trading down. So I'll ultimately just say yes, just because the odds are there, but definitely they would love to trade down.
Man, I kind of feel like they put themselves in a position where, they got a lot of these veteran players on these 1-year, 2-year deals and things of that nature, to where they don't have to go after a certain position. They're put themselves in a position where they can pick best player available or go wherever they decide to go based on who's there. You see it the same way, or you think that they have to go in a certain position?
It's so bizarre. On the one hand, I agree with you 100%. They did a good job of covering up any perceived weaknesses to a degree, and they have a rotation really about every position. There's no position where you're well, if they don't draft somebody, they are hosed. They're just lacking upside at certain spots, namely like edge rusher. Possibly they could use a corner. I think they could use more speed on offense. But they did enough across the board that they can kind of go best player available mode. And then you combine them picking at 29 when you don't exactly know who's even going to be there, and it makes for a very challenging situation. They don't have, like I said, that screaming need. I would, say edge and corner would be probably top of my list. And I think we look at the draft board, that makes a lot of sense for what's likely to be there, not just in the first round, but then if you look at the second round, that could influence what they do. But yeah, I agree. They could. There's almost, other than quarterback, I don't know that there's a position that you could say to me, boy, they're going to draft this guy, and I would be like, well, that's weird. Anything to me would be on the table, but obviously a couple positions stand out more than others.
So I totally agree that it's obviously not going to be a quarterback. I also think it's not one other position I think you could lock out if they pick at 29 is tight end. You bring Ertz back, you re-sign Bates, you just took Sennett. That's the only other position I think you could lock out. I think outside of that, it is BPA with a lean towards edge. I think it works well that there are edge guys available there that make a lot of sense. Standig, I need you to not rain on my parade, okay? It's raining enough outside. Even BMitch would call this rain outside.
Yeah.
I like the kid, Mykel Williams from Georgia, a lot. I think he's a top 10, top 15 player who's going to slide a little because he played hurt last year. Tell me he can get to 29.
Well, do you want me to tell you he can get to 29, or do you want me to not rain on your parade? What?
Tell him the truth. He can handle it. He's a grown man.
So I think, again, this is where it gets really interesting. Like, we know Abdul Carter is going to be the first edge rusher. He'll go off the board, somewhere by the third pick. There's another 5 or 6 guys, maybe even a little bit more, that could go in round one. But finding any consensus on the order is really rough. To look at Mykel Williams in particular, like, there are projections where he goes, 8 to Carolina or 9 to the Saints, 10 to the Bears.
Damn.
But he's also on the other big board, public big boards. He's rated in the 20s. And it's a similar story with guys like Shamar Stewart and Donovan Ezeraku, et cetera. So I'm going to assume he's not going to be there. There does seem to be enough people out there who like his game. He was a team captain. He didn't have the best 2024 season, partly because of an ankle injury. But when you compare him side by side to Jalen Walker, another outside edge presence, who's probably also going to go high in the first round, like he compares very, very favorably. But he may slip, but I don't know if I see him slipping to 29.
Yeah, I think it's like 24.
Yeah, I mean, there's just too many teams that are going to value that position. I mean, we can talk about some of the other fun spots, but edge rushers cost a ton of money when you have to go sign one or extend one. So to be able to draft a guy that could help you, those guys just don't stay around, and I'd be surprised if he's there at 29.
It's lion season, right?
He ain't gonna make it. I know.
I've heard about that.
So a lot of these things you're starting to hear, that's people trying to make you think something, and they're gonna be drafting them.
He ain't getting there. But I'd like it if he did. I know you just put out your mock on your podcast. People should check that out, listen to it. What do you have them doing at 29 right now?
So for me, this is sort of like when I do my mocks. I didn't do this on the pod, but I kind of play it out through round 2 because I think it's important to see not just what's there when your team picks in the first round, but there's always every team needs multiple spots. So what's available later on in the draft? Washington, we know, does not have a third round pick, so we're just looking at the top 2 for the most part. And edge rusher, again, they've got some, they've got enough pieces to work with, but really it's not the most exciting groups, to say the least. The thing is, though, that at the end of the second round, I think there's going to be some guys still on the board, whereas corner, I think, thins out a bit earlier. And if they are high on some guys, I think Siobhan Ravel from East Carolina is a really fascinating player. He had a lot of first-round buzz before he had an ACL tear last year. That's knocked him down. And also, he played against, lesser competition than a power conference school. But people I've talked to really are fascinated by his coverage skills. He's got good size. Press corner would fit here. He's got that dog competitor aspect that this coaching staff likes. So for me, it's like a guy like that versus, say, either a Nick Scorton at edge, who's He had 10.5 sacks as a sophomore at Purdue, was a team captain at 19. He's very competitive. Everything about him screams what Washington's looking for. He was a little bit of a down year last year, stat-wise, at Texas A&M, but I think he fits a lot. James Pierce, the edge rusher from Tennessee, production-wise, there's no real debate. He just piled up the stats, and he also had the fastest 10-yard split among edge rushers at the combine, and that's a metric. Yeah, that's a metric Adam Peters definitely liked. There's seemingly some questions about his football motivations, I guess you could say. I don't know. So depending on what teams think of that. But again, I just think that when you're looking at this, there's better edge rushers later in round 2 than corner. So I'm going corner, and right now Ravel is the guy that kind of intrigues me the most.
That's really interesting. So on Beltway Football, we did our first and probably only mock draft yesterday, and I had them taking Ravel, but at 61. You don't think he gets that far?
So you like if you look at the public big boards, like our guy, the Athletic, Dane Brugler, put out his draft guide, The Beast, this week, and he has Ravel down around 61.
That's why I thought it. I mean, I thought he's a second rounder. I thought Washington could get a real player there.
And look, obviously that's what I'm saying with this draft. The evaluations are all over the place. But just in talking to some people about in the league about the corner spot, whenever I bring him up, you can see, I can hear it in their voice, or I can see it in their eyes. They get pretty excited about him. It's just, again, he's a little tricky of an evaluation. He doesn't have a ton of starts in college because he kind of, just a little bit of a late bloomer. He's also an older guy. He's 24, right? I mean, so that's not not ideal, right? If you're talking sort of long term, but so basically you're kind of thinking, what's the upside here? Has he already reached it? Whereas like other guys, maybe you're like, hey, there's still a lot more to go. But yeah, I think he's interesting. Look, they could also have in that range. Was it Maxwell Harrison from Kentucky ran like one of the fastest 40 times at the combine. Azaria Thomas from Florida State, not the fastest corner, but excellent size and press coverage ability. Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame. Like, there's a bunch of corners that could be their choice at 29, but I just kind of like Ravel, and I'm curious to see what they think of that, what their evaluation is.
All right, we will keep our eyes posted. Maybe we do this again before the draft, Benny. Thank you for the time, man.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks a lot. Have a great weekend.
All right, bro. Take care, man.
That is Ben Standig from The Athletic joining us via the Rude Guest Hotline. You can check out his work at Ben Standig.